Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Got a Case of Wanderlust podcast, a show dedicated to all things travel. I'm your host, Lydia, and on this episode, you'll hear a conversation between me and another fellow traveler that will hopefully inspire you for your next travel adventure. If you enjoy listening, consider following the show and giving it a rating on Spotify, or if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, leave a quick review. It would mean so much to me. All right, thank you so much for being here today. All right, welcome to the Got a Case of Wanderlust podcast. I'm your host, Lydia. Today we have another special guest with us. His name is Jeremiah, who is a California-based award-winning photographer and travel writer whose work has been published internationally. He's the author of 4 books about photography and travel experiences, as well as a mathematics professor at San Bernardino Valley College. I'm very appreciative that he's extended his time with us today. So, Jeremiah, thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So the first question I always start out with is, what sparked your wanderlust, your desire to travel?
Basically, when I was younger, I remember, always reading things like National Geographic. When Michael Palin started traveling, his first series, Around the World in 80 Days, just seeing these things and just thinking, oh man, someday this would be great. I'd love to do it. But my problem was, I ended up becoming an academic. So, bachelor's degree, master's degree, doctorate. Started teaching right after I got my my doctorate. Spent 7 years as an adjunct professor, and that means teaching at 2 or 3 colleges. Summer's not optional, so just work. Finally landed a full-time job around 2005, and then I realized, hey, summer's now optional. And I'm one of those types, I just like to dive in. So my first big international trip was Tibet. I look back on that trip now, that was very rough. Yeah. And I think, not knowing any better, that was was fine, but, that was a very rough trip. But that's sort of like, okay, all the things I've heard about and, thought about with travel, absolutely. The sights are just incredible. The photos I was able to take, it was just point and shoot basically, because the skies are so incredible. Tibetan Buddhism is incredibly ornate. So the temples and, all the prayer flags and such. And so it's just like, okay, I want to do this again. So then I waited a year because I had to save up, and then, headed to Peru, Machu Picchu. Same thing. Okay, I need to make this a priority. This is incredible. So then, those were both winter. No, one was a summer trip, one was a winter trip, and then I just started, oscillating, or doing both if I could afford it. And then, then I realized, hey, spring break. I have a spring break. So first spring break, I went to Panama. And just sort of it just sort of snowballed, and you start with 1, 2 countries. Hey, I think I could hit 5, maybe I can hit 10, and just made it a priority once I started doing it. And then I was very fortunate when I met my wife, because she's also a traveler. So we just kept going.
That's incredible. I love how you kickstarted your travel journeys in Tibet. That's amazing.
Yeah, that was like looking back, that was a crazy first trip, but
What made you choose Tibet?
I had been studying Eastern philosophy when I was in college, when I was an undergrad. I took a course, just as an elective, and I was really taken by Zen Buddhism in particular, but Buddhism in general. And so I was sort of reading about the different types of Buddhism and the different interpretations, and that just sort of led me to Tibet and the Dalai Lama. And I just thought, okay, this to me, seems like a very interesting place, very religious place. I'm not religious, but I just sort of was taken by it. And then the photographer in me saw the Patala Palace and some of the scenery. We went up to base camp of Everest, And it was just like, these are just things I want to do. And it sounds like, I kind of felt like, I'm coming into this rather late. So let me just dive in and do it. But it
Better
was,
late than never.
yeah, yeah. But I've done well. I mean, the last 15 years, I'm coming up on 100 countries. So I've been making up for lost time.
Oh, for sure. So, what would you say travel means to you now versus when you first started?
Now it's definitely something, at the time it was new and exhilarating, and it's still exhilarating, but it's just sort of become just part of the fabric of my existence, as it were. It's just something I look forward to. I try to plan something every summer and every winter, and if I can get something else in, I will. And I realized, with 2020 and everything coming to a halt, how important it had become. It was sort of like, this is the one thing I do when I'm not teaching, when I'm not prepping and grading, that I look forward to the most. And so, just sort of, I was fortunate. I just came off of a sabbatical in spring. So, my wife and I started traveling again last May, and I just told her, we've not traveled for over 2 years. Let's just pile it on. And, I don't I normally can't travel like in February or April. I can now. So, we headed off to Ecuador in February and Turkey in April. It's just something I really look forward to. I like the fact that, it's sort of my outlet for my photography, and now I do the writing about it. So it's just sort of just become an all inclusive thing. It just sort of, it satisfies my need to just have a break and get away. It satisfies, my creative desires, as it were. It's just something, and it's also something to really look forward to. I'm teaching 2 classes right now. They end the end of the month in June, and then July I'm off again. And then I'll come back in August, teach, and then I'm off again in December. So it's just something really to look forward to. And fortunately, my wife and I both enjoy planning. She's even better at it than I am, so I just leave it to her.
Yeah, no, that's a wonderful way to spend your breaks. I wish that everyone had the opportunity to do so because travel is definitely like something I look forward to as well. Like it's just such an amazing way to make the most out of this life.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, to me, I'm just like, it's nice to see things, on television and on the big screen, but to actually be there in person. I remember turning the corner and seeing the treasury at Petra was just an incredible. Yeah, I was just like, oh my god, I've seen this in films, or I was fortunate enough to be. We took like the first bus up to Machu Picchu, so everything was still shrouded in mist, and then over about 30 minutes, the mist slowly started to uncover, and it was like, this is the way to experience Machu Picchu. I mean, here's this lost city that's all covered and you can't see it, and then slowly it reveals itself. Things like that are just, you have to experience it.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it's definitely one of my dreams. So when did photography start to become part of your travels?
It always was. So I started sort of by happenstance. A friend of mine in high school took a photojournalism course, and he was looking for someone to go out with him so he could practice. And so I, picked up a camera. The only choice at the time was film, and just went out and he kind of taught me the basics, f-stop and shutter speed and all of that. And we'd head out for the day, shoot a couple rolls of film, come back, make a makeshift dark room in one of our parents' bathrooms and develop the film and such. And so I just sort of kept at it. Um, and then when I planned the Tibet trip, I wasn't sure about film. Could I get film in Tibet? Would the film survive all the screenings, the X-rays? So that's actually when I switched to digital. I'd always shot film up for like 20 years, and so I picked up a little Fuji camera at the time, and so that was my introduction to digital photography. And like I said, it was such an amazing place. The interesting thing was, on film I mostly shot black and white because that's what I knew how to develop. But Tibet is just so colorful. Every photo I took was color. It was quite the change. So not only had I switched to digital, I'm now shooting in color. Um, but that sort of, then when I came back, I created a website. So, I say I'm relatively new to travel writing, but actually I did at the time. I would write about each day, and then there would be links to the photos. Um, so it was sort of a way I was trying to get other people to experience what I was doing and sharing it. But yeah, the photography's always been part of my travel.
Mm, okay. And what kind of things do you look for when deciding what and how you photograph?
For me, my first love is architecture and ruins. So if I can go somewhere that has some amazing ruins, I love that just from historical. But I also enjoy just architecture in general, and modern architecture in particular intrigues me. Over time, I started to realize, yeah, I was very good at going to incredibly busy sites and taking photos with no people in them. But I realized at a point that that was actually detrimental. So I started focusing more also on street photography, getting locals in my photographs. Um, so that was around 2014. That was my first sabbatical. And my wife and I spent 3 months exploring Asia and retracing the Silk Road. And so that was a huge benefit to include locals in those photos. So now I also keep that in mind. When we went to Taiwan, oh, they have a night market culture. So I want to make sure I go out and photograph these night markets, and go to the ones that the locals go to, get a real flavor of the society, and and also get some good food. Nothing wrong with that. Um,
Oh, yeah.
Though also I will say, when I first started off, I really focused on, what would be a good photo, what can I photograph? I was only interested in experiences that I could get, good photos. As time has gone on, I've realized, there's certain times I also want to add things that, are great experiences. I can't necessarily photograph them. That's fine.
Do you find it difficult to like battle the struggle between wanting to take photos and be in the moment?
No, absolutely. And, I'm one of those, I like to travel light. So I normally take one camera, maybe two lenses. So sometimes it is a question of, okay, do I want to get the camera out? Do I want to change the lens, to get this photo, or do I want to just, experience it? 'Cause my mindset more is, like, I value the experience more. So if I can take some photos, great. If not, I'm just going to focus on the experience. And now I have the benefit of nothing else. I can write about it. So there's something that could come of it more than just the experience.
So, during your over 100 countries travel journey, you've also been going to many like less popular destinations that aren't necessarily at the top of tourist travel lists. So, why do you enjoy going to these less popular places?
As I traveled, more and more, I just found like when I started exploring Europe, I've been to Western Europe, but I actually like Eastern Europe a little more. Again, a little lesser known, fewer tourists. When I was in Vietnam, we did the whole length of the country. It's a wonderful country, highly recommend it. But in the middle of the country, so we were in Hoi An, and there was this opportunity to travel to this some ruins of some ancient culture I'd never heard of before. It was like a 2 or 3 hour bus ride on this old rickety bus that kept breaking down. Um, but when you got there, it was only local tourists, and I thought this is nice, because again, photographically, if I go somewhere, like the Eiffel Tower or Christ the Redeemer, wonderful sights, but how can I photograph these, experiencing these in ways that other people haven't? If I go somewhere that's lesser known, then I kind of feel a little more freedom because I've
Mm-hmm.
not seen photos from here. I've not experienced this before. So I just started to be interested in that. I remember when I talked my wife into El Salvador. She's British, and uh, she was like, why El Salvador? And I said, well, one, Americans don't go to El Salvador. our thinking of El Salvador is not favorable. Um, but I don't think that's the case. So let's go and see and explore and really see the country. Same thing with Nicaragua. It was like that was one of our favorite trips, and it's just it's just not the top destination. Uh, I fully encourage going to the top destinations, but there's other countries and other sites that, like I said, they're less visited. When I was in Paris, we did Versailles. I hated it. It was just thousands of people. It was like a cattle call through. I just, oh no, no way. Eastern Europe, there was a little mansion. Guess what? It was designed by the same person who did Versailles. It was like a mini Versailles, and we were the only people there. I so much preferred that.
Mm, I am totally with you on that. I feel like the experience is a lot more significant and memorable if you don't have to share it with lots of other people. So yeah, I'm all about visiting less touristy places, especially with the problem of over tourism becoming such a problem now for the sustainability of travel. So, in your opinion, why do you think it's important we try to visit these more underrated places?
Well, I think I mean, part of it is that, absolutely. I mean, a friend of ours went to Venice and hated it because, again, it was just so flooded with tourists. Versus when we did it, we actually we picked a time that was less inundated, uh, which helps. But I think it's also just sort of I find it interesting that certain people get their ideas from, shows or travel guides. It's like, and then suddenly that's where everybody goes. This is the new hot spot. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. But I would rather go somewhere, that's less busy because one, the experience is better, and then two, it also, it sort of spreads things out, as it were.
Mhm.
So you have, thousands of people are inundating this one spot. You start to think about, yeah, how did they get there? The fuel that was used to do that. Some of these places, so much debris gets left over. Some of these beautiful gardens that get trampled on. It's just like, to me, it's like spread it out, go there, but also, try to find a time where it's less busy, maybe off season, or realize that, like when I was in Cambodia, I mean, yes, we did Angkor Wat. You have to do Angkor Wat. But then I spent a couple of days, we had a local guide, and I just said, take me to temples you normally don't take people to. And we explored like 13 small little temples, and it was incredible. It was, again, for the most part, we had them to ourselves, and you just felt like, okay, this is more natural. And again, I've come all this way. I want to make the most of it. Um, I've seen some people, that set these records for like youngest or quickest to visit all the countries, and I look at their route, and I see, man, that was a very inefficient way of getting there, and doing what you did. I would rather, like I said, my 3 months in Southeast Asia, that was one big flight, and then it was all either small flights or trains. Yeah, I felt a little bit better about that versus keep flying from LA to Asia. That's not a good way to travel. Um, and like I said, also I just I prefer sites that are a little less crowded. It's nice to sort of here's this site you've never heard of. Look at these photos I took. Look how incredible it is. Maybe you can consider going here.
Mm. Yeah, I like that idea of still hitting up the major touristy areas of like the most popular spots in a destination, but also getting getting outside of that and exploring more on your own. And I totally agree that it definitely spreads your impact and decreases the amount of like negative impacts we have upon the destination. I just had a conversation with another podcast, and she was telling me an idea of second city tourism where we visit the main city, but then we also get out into the local communities. So I think that was a cool idea.
Actually, no, it's interesting. I've been thinking that too. Is like, wouldn't it be cool to like do a travel show on second cities? You hear, you think of France, you think Paris. Paris is wonderful. No complaints about Paris. However, there's so many other places to go and see that, aren't as crowded, could definitely benefit from the tourist dollar. And you can take a train there or a bus, and have less impact. So no, it's definitely something, and also, as I travel more, I start to become a little more selective. So, I have no aspirations to hit every country in the world. I don't think that's going to happen. So, of the near 100 that are left, you know, why do I want to go here? I think a bit more about it. How can I get there? No, I love that idea. I said, yeah, I've had the same thought. Just can't do a TV show. So
Yeah, no, I think there's so much value in going to the spots that aren't as hyped up because you could have just as meaningful, if not more, like meaningful experiences there. Um, and it's also like you don't have to take a like to be more sustainable in your travels. It's not about not going and doing the touristy things and like taking away from your trip, but it's like how can you add to it, add value to it by visiting, more places that are less touristy, quote unquote.
I had a roommate in Peru who taught me, go just a couple blocks off the main square. The main square, yeah, I remember it happened in Cuzco. Yeah, the main square, the food's expensive. It's all homogenous. It's what they think tourists are going to want. Head off a couple blocks. This is now where the locals eat. And, prices are better. There's more diversity in the food. And I've followed that advice now for 15 years. It's a wonderful way of doing it. Again, visit the main square. There's beautiful. There's a reason to be there. So Cusco, there's these beautiful churches. I was fortunate enough to be there during Christmas. So on Christmas Eve, it turns into this huge market where they're selling goods and wares, and then the next day there's parades. All that was wonderful, but I ate like 3 blocks away.
Mm. I think one of the struggles though when we travel is that we just simply aren't aware of these. They're not as promoted as you said. So how do you discover where the locals go and how do you find these less like touristy parts?
When I first started traveling, it was pretty much like travel guides and just relying on that. But again, those are what focus on the main sites and the main attractions. Now I find, one of the things my wife loves to do is when we're thinking about a trip, we just start doing Google image and what does this place actually look like? Oh, this looks interesting, or oh, that's not as interesting. Or I'll research the history of a location. And so it's become much easier. It just takes some work. I may have to dig down, go a couple pages in Google return, results to find what I'm looking for, but it's so nice to be able to, do that now and find out, what are some off the beaten path destinations, or what are, here's your top 10 things to do in Nice. What's the next 10? That sort of thing.
So, what are some of the most underrated destinations in your opinion?
Well, as I mentioned, El Salvador and Nicaragua, I absolutely love them. Uh, like I said, we just came back from Ecuador, but my intent there was I wanted to not do Galapagos. I wanted to actually explore the country of Ecuador, and highly recommend that. That was wonderful. Africa, I mean, I think Namibia is probably not a lesser known site, but I spent about 2 weeks there. Amazing country. Yeah, I would just say, like I said, Eastern Europe. I've really enjoyed some time there. That was another one I had to talk my wife into it, especially from an American perspective. You think Europe, you think Western Europe, or Southern Europe. I have a friend who, before the pandemic, every year she went to Italy. Amazing country. Go to Italy. But I had a great time in Macedonia. Eastern Europe has a lot of good things, a lot of very interesting things, a lot of very interesting history.
Okay, awesome. If you could go back to when you first started traveling, would you do anything differently, if anything?
I probably wouldn't start with Tibet. Because like I said, looking back now, that was a rough trip.
Mm,
Uh, looking back now, I'm glad I did it. I only jokingly say I wouldn't. But like I said, it was one of those. It was good. I was less aware of travel back then. So I would, I definitely wish I you know, done a bit more then. Because when you're younger, you have lesser issues, and as you start to get older and start to deal with some things that aren't nice. So I mean, that would have been nice, but that again, that said, I think I've done pretty well.
amazing. Yeah. So I have a few rapid fire questions to wrap up.
Okay,
What is your dream destination?
Yemen.
Okay. And a memorable meal that you've had.
One particular meal, I will say last summer we were in London. My wife's mother is still there, and we were there on my birthday, and my birthday fell on a Sunday, and I finally got to have the Sunday roast.
Yay. That's awesome. And if you ever come to Chicago, I actually do my own food tour.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. And then lastly, what is a special place in your heart?
Well, I mean, again, being the first, Tibet is just to me still an amazing destination. Um, and I look back, I said it was a rough trip, but I look back on it, so memorably. And, it was just the sights that I saw, and, it just opened my eyes to so many things that, it's like, okay, now that I've done this, I definitely, what are some other places I've just always wanted to go to? How can I make it happen? So to me, that one's just always going to be, very special.
Yeah, I feel like first trips always hit you like super hard. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Jeremiah. Please share how we could connect with you, your books, and your photography.
Oh, absolutely. So your best bet is to go to my website, which is jeremiahgilbert.com. There you'll see a link to books. So I have 3 travel books. The most recent is called On to Plan C, A Return to Travel. It's about exactly that. We were sidelined for over 2 years with COVID. May of last year, we headed off to Fiji because that was the first trip that was canceled in 2020. So it's basically the first year back experiences. And it's also my first book to include photography. So it's half travelogue, half photo essays. And that's how I plan on doing it from here on out. On Instagram, I'm JG_travels.
All right, cool. Thank you so much again, Jeremiah.
Oh, thank you for having me. Very enjoyable.
Thank you so much for being here and listening to this episode. If you can take 10 seconds out of your day, please spread the travel love by following this podcast and giving it a rating. Or if there's anyone else in your life that has a case of wanderlust, it would mean so much if you shared this episode with them. You can find me sharing even more travel-related content on Instagram at God of Case of Wanderlust and on my personal Instagram at Lydia Schultz, _Z. I also have a travel blog for my extra passionate travelers out there, which can be found at godofcaseofwanderlust.com. And all of this can be found in the show notes.